Have you ever wondered why some women seem to vanish, not from sight, but from the invisible web of craving, longing, and emotional pursuit? Not with a scream, not with tears, but with a silence so pure it unsettles the room. A quiet so complete, it no longer begs to be understood. This is not the silence of defeat, it is the silence of arrival. A woman who no longer desires has reached the edge of illusion and chosen not to step back into it. She does not burn with hunger for validation. She does not negotiate her self-worth in the economy of longing. And because of that, she becomes something rare, something untouchable, a mirror that no man can easily read and no ego can comfortably possess. Carl Jung once wrote that where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking. But what happens when a woman stops wanting both? Not love, not power, not even the soft approval of being needed. She is turned inward into a cave lit only by her own knowing. And this, for the masculine ego, which feeds on pursuit, performance, and possession, is terrifying. The woman who no longer desires is not empty. She is full of what no one gave her. Her gaze no longer pleads, it pierces. Her body no longer aches to be chosen, it has already chosen stillness. Her attention, once scattered like petals across the feet of lovers who never stayed, now folds back into herself like the final page of a book, finished, resolved, beyond grasp. She once knew the sweet ache of wanting. Oh yes, she played in the gardens of hope, fed by fantasies, illusions, silent waiting rooms, where the feminine waits to be seen. She once stretched herself thin in pursuit of a story that never wrote her as its ending. But now she knows. Desire, when misdirected, is just disguised exile from one's own center. And so she left, not dramatically, not even loudly, no slamming doors, no angry monologues, just a closing of her eyes to what no longer nourished. Like a flame withdrawing into the wick, she retreated not out of fear, but from wisdom. You may try to pull her back, but your hands will find only air. You may try to provoke her jealousy, her softness, her ache, but all that remains is a still pool that no longer reflects your face. The man who once had power through her yearning now stands before a ghost of what was. And it is not she who is haunted, it is him. This is the alchemy of feminine individuation. When a woman detaches from the compulsion to be loved and learns to love without compulsion. Jung would call it the union of the anima and animus within, the great psychological marriage. She becomes both the nurturer and the protector, the dreamer and the guardian of boundaries. She no longer seeks the masculine to complete her. She meets him only when he is whole. This is why she becomes dangerous, not in violence, not in rebellion, but in resonance. Her silence echoes the places, in a man he has yet to face. Her absence from the emotional chase is not rejection, but reflection. She no longer participates in the illusion that she is less whole than him, or that he holds something she must earn. To the unaware man, she appears distant. To the wounded man, she feels cold. But to the awakened one, she is sacred. She does not seduce. She summons. She does not perform. She reveals. And only the man who has done his own shadow work, who has sat with his own hunger without devouring, can stand in her presence without trembling. You, listening now, may wonder, how does a woman get here? How does she cross the burning forest of romantic delusion and arrive on the other side, intact? The answer is pain. Not the kind that makes you cry for help, but the kind that makes you stare into your own soul and not look away. The kind of pain that burns away illusion, not hope. The kind that does not wound the heart, but silences the noise around it. When she no longer desires, it is not because she has lost feeling. It is because she has finally learned to feel without distortion, to need without attaching, to love without losing herself. And in that rare clarity, she no longer craves, she chooses. There is something primal in the way the masculine psyche reacts to detachment, especially when it comes from the very source it once believed would never walk away. The feminine that once adored, longed, waited. In Jungian terms, she was his anima, the projected ideal, the fantasy mother, the muse that soothed his wounds and mirrored his potential. But the anima, once reclaimed by the woman herself, becomes no longer an object in his dreamscape, but a sovereign entity in her own reality. He doesn't recognize this version of her, not because she's hidden, but because he never truly saw her without his projections. The woman who no longer desires is not unfamiliar, she is unfiltered. She is no longer shaped by the reflection of his needs. And in that unfamiliarity, the male ego trembles. Because what he thought he could predict, pursue, or provoke, now eludes him entirely. Desire had once been her tether. It made her pliable, soft to manipulation, sensitive to abandonment. Her yearning created a script, one in which he played the hero, the savior, the center. But when she released that desire, not repressed it, not numbed it, but transcended it, she also released the role he thought he had to play. And without her need, his identity within the dynamic crumbles. For many men, this is unconsciously threatening. Not because they are cruel, but because they are uninitiated. They have never been taught to hold presence without power, to exist in intimacy without conquest, to love a woman who is already whole. They are trained, even rewarded, for responding to need, not depth. So when she becomes depth without need, when she walks in silence without retreat, when she gives without grasping, she becomes illegible to the conditioned masculine. She does not beg, she does not chase, she does not compete, she simply is. And in a world of noise, that beingness is radical, it is unnerving, it is dangerous, because she no longer needs you to desire her. She does not audition for attention. She has learned the sacred art of being witnessed without performing. And because of that, every gesture from her becomes sacred, not because it is rare, but because it is not given from hunger. It is given from wholeness. You may think this makes her cold, detached, or disinterested, but you'd be wrong. What you're witnessing is emotional maturity, the outcome of deep psychic integration. She has danced with her own shadows, faced the monsters in her basement, and no longer projects those unmet parts onto you. She no longer needs your chaos to complete her storm. She no longer confuses suffering with connection. In truth, she may still love you, perhaps even more deeply than before. But now she loves you with eyes open, not from the wounded child within her, but from the wise woman she has become. She no longer trades her silence for affection, no longer sacrifices her boundaries for belonging, and no longer performs the choreography of desirable femininity just to be kept. This is the power of the woman who has individuated, the cornerstone of Carl Jung's teaching. She has moved beyond persona, the mask she once wore to be liked, loved, or chosen. She has moved through her own anima and met the animus within, the inner masculine that protects her energy, guards her peace, holds her presence. She no longer seeks your structure because she has become her own. And yet, in that very self-containment, she offers something more valuable than desire. She offers resonance, not the echo of past wounds, but the vibration of inner truth. If you can meet her there, not as a saviour, but as a sovereign, then what you build will not be dependency dressed in romance. It will be union forged in fire. But most won't meet her there. Most will feel rejected, emasculated, confused, because they were not taught how to love a woman who does not revolve around them. They were not taught that her stillness is not a challenge. It is an invitation to meet her beyond roles, beyond fantasy, beyond your own fear of irrelevance. You, hearing this now, may feel called, or you may feel threatened. That's the mirror she holds. It is not meant to flatter. It is meant to reveal. She is not interested in comfort. She is interested in truth. And truth, as Jung taught, begins where illusion ends. She walks into a room, and there's a silence that follows her. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of expectation. She doesn't need to be the most beautiful woman there, nor the loudest, nor the most admired. Her power no longer relies on external measurement. She carries something else now, something older than beauty, deeper than charm, a kind of energy that cannot be bought, chased, or imitated. This is what Jung called the integrated self. She has crossed the threshold where the unconscious no longer rules her through projection and compulsion. She has retrieved her power from the places she once left it, in lovers, in longing, in the need to be needed. What remains is a woman who does not need to take your breath away to feel worthy. She has become her own breath. This is the most dangerous kind of woman to a man who is still governed by ego, still seeking to define himself through her reaction to him, because no reaction will come. Not the one he's used to, at least. She will not flinch to win his approval, nor wilt to make him feel strong. Her silence is not confusion, it is clarity. Her stillness is not fear, it is boundary. She knows what her energy is worth, and she will not spend it on anything unworthy of her evolution. Once she would have interpreted his coldness as a challenge to melt, his distance as an invitation to chase, his cruelty as a puzzle to solve. Now she sees clearly. She's rewritten the narrative. His inability to love her deeply is not a reflection of her lack, but of his own limitation. His silence no longer activates her wound. It confirms her decision. And he feels it deeply, even if he doesn't understand why. It is not that she left. It is how she left. Without drama, without begging, without a single attempt to prove her value to someone who never truly saw it. That kind of departure sears into the psyche, because it says, I have nothing to prove. It says, I am no longer available for confusion disguised as connection. It says, you can no longer rent space in me with inconsistency. That message does not need to be spoken aloud. It echoes in the absence of her attention. It screams in the silence where her validation used to be. A man may try to forget her, to erase her, to replace her, but you cannot replace a mirror that showed you everything you were too afraid to see. If he was never forced to sit with his own shadows before, now he will. Not because she punished him, but because she removed the distraction of her devotion. In doing so, she forces him to face the very void he used her to escape. This is why she becomes dangerous, not to the man who is ready, but to the man who is not. She is not here to wound, she's here to reflect. There's something you must understand. This kind of woman isn't born, she is forged. Through heartbreaks that didn't break her but reformed her. Through nights of aching silence when no one came to save her. Through the realization that she had been writing love letters to people who could not read. She became this version of herself not by luck, but by choosing wholeness over performance, truth over validation, self-respect over temporary comfort. And so now, she is no longer impressed by charm without character, no longer seduced by intensity without consistency, no longer interested in conversations that exhaust rather than enrich. She has tuned her heart to the frequency of depth. If you do not speak that language, she will not pretend to understand. There is a raw, magnetic quality to this detachment. It doesn't repel, it draws in, but not just anyone. Only those who can stand in the fire of their own self-confrontation and not run. Only those who do not need to dominate her mystery, but hold it with reverence. She is not the woman you earn through conquest. She is the one you meet when you've already conquered yourself. So if you find yourself in her presence, whether as a friend, a lover, a stranger across a room, know this: she will never need you. And because of that, if she chooses to walk beside you, it is not to fill a void. It is because your paths are aligned. And if you cannot meet her there, she will not beg. She will not bleed. She will simply vanish into the life she built with her own hands, leaving behind the quietest, most unforgettable absence. The most disarming thing about her presence is that it no longer seeks. It does not hunger. It does not wait with bated breath for reciprocity, nor does it seduce with the ache of incompletion. It simply is. And in that beingness, she redefines everything the world once taught about feminine energy. She is no longer the siren, no longer the wounded girl hoping he'll notice. She is not bitter. She is not angry. She is finished. And that is far more unsettling. Jung once wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But she has faced hers. The woman who no longer desires has sat in the naked heat of self-truth without flinching. She has emptied herself of false stories, of performative need, of illusions once dressed as love. She's let every fire burn through her, and now she carries the ashes with grace. This is why he can't stop thinking about her. Not because of what she gave him, but because of what she reclaimed. She did not leave an empty space. She left a mirror. And in that mirror, he now sees his own avoidance, his unfinished work, his unconscious games. When she stopped responding, it revealed how much he relied on her reaction to feel real, how much of his identity was propped up by her longing, how much of his control was tied to her emotional availability. Without it, he is confronted with his own vacancy. You see, when a woman no longer desires, it doesn't mean she has stopped loving. It means she has stopped abandoning herself in the name of love. It means she no longer allows her nervous system to be hijacked by unpredictability. It means she has stopped confusing emotional intensity with emotional depth. Her stillness is not an absence. It is a sanctuary she refuses to let be desecrated again. And it is in that sanctuary that she becomes untouchable. Not in the way of coldness or pride, but in the way of sacredness. She is no longer the ground for someone else's storm. She has built a garden where only those who come with reverence may enter. She protects it, not with walls, but with standards. She does not chase. She does not convince. She does not lower her frequency to be understood. She simply continues, soft, silent, magnetic. so now she does not desire to be desired, she desires to be met. Soul to soul, not ego to ego. This terrifies those who still operate from shadow. Because you cannot impress a woman who sees through performance. You cannot lure her with the bait of inconsistency. You cannot scare her with silence, because she has learned to thrive inside her own. She does not interpret withdrawal as mystery. She sees it for what it is, avoidance. She does not romanticize the unpredictable. She recognizes it as emotional immaturity. She does not try to heal him. She blesses his journey and chooses her own. To be clear, she still feels, deeply. But her feelings are no longer negotiable. They are no longer up for manipulation. She has pulled her energy back from every place it was once exploited. And now, her intuition is sharp. Her yes is powerful. Her no is thunder. This woman doesn't punish. She doesn't destroy. She simply removes herself, and in doing so, dismantles every illusion that her presence once enabled. The man who thought she would never walk away learns what silence really feels like. Not the kind that begs to be broken, but the kind that rebuilds the one who speaks it. This is the feminine that cannot be owned, only witnessed. The love that doesn't seduce, but transforms. The woman who no longer desires, not because she has closed herself off, but because she has finally come home to herself, is the most dangerous of all, because she will never again barter her sacred for breadcrumbs. She is no longer a seeker, she is the flame, and only those who burn with their own light can sit beside her without shrinking. To the unawakened man, her silence feels like exile, but it is not meant to exile him, it is meant to restore her. This is the nuance most fail to see. Her withdrawal is not punishment, it is not manipulation, it is not the cold war of a wounded heart, it is the restoration of energetic integrity. She is no longer willing to spill her sacredness into places that will only consume it. She once believed that love was sacrifice, that to keep someone, she must bleed just a little. So she gave pieces of herself in exchange for fleeting closeness. She offered compassion without containment, softness without safety. She called it love, but in truth it was survival. It was the aching performance of enoughness in a world that mistook her openness for access. But those days are gone. She has buried that version of herself, and in her place stands a woman who no longer proves, persuades, or pleads. This is what makes her so dangerous. Not to everyone, but to those who have only known how to relate through power, possession, and pursuit. Because she no longer plays the game. She no longer responds to silence with anxiety. She meets it with stillness. She no longer reacts to emotional withdrawal by pouring more of herself in. She lets it fall away. She has reclaimed the space where her need once lived and filled it with self-respect. Her absence will haunt the man who once fed off her need for closeness, because it reveals the asymmetry that was always there. It shows how much of the connection was built on her willingness to remain hungry. Without her longing, the illusion collapses, and he is left not with the memory of what she gave him, but the emptiness of what he never returned. And yet, even now, she does not hate him. She does not resent, because she has risen beyond the wound. That is the deeper secret. The most dangerous woman is also the most free. Not because she has armored herself, but because she no longer fears her own depths. She has kissed her own darkness. She has met the trembling child within and told her, "You are not too much. You are not too deep. You are not too feeling. You are divine." And in that remembering, she no longer seeks permission to be whole. Her body no longer tenses in the presence of distance. Her nervous system no longer coils in anticipation of inconsistency. She is no longer the woman who will twist herself into silence just to keep from being left. She is now the woman who knows silence is sacred, and only those who can sit inside its stillness with her are worthy of hearing her speak. If a man returns, he must come clean, he must come clear, he must come ready, not with charm, not with strategy, but with presence. Because she will feel the difference. She will sense the hollow notes behind pretty words. She will know if he is there to possess or to witness. And if he isn't ready, she won't hate him. She'll simply walk away, again, without sound, without performance, because she no longer desires what doesn't meet her truth. She no longer makes herself small to be understood. This is the Jungian process of individuation. The becoming of a self who is not fragmented by approval, who is not distorted by need. She has integrated her shadow, not by denying it, but by holding it close. Her darkness is no longer a thing to hide. It is the soil where her wisdom grew, and from it she blossoms into the woman who does not need to be needed, the woman who does not chase affection, but attracts reverence. The woman who would rather walk alone than be worshipped for only part of her truth. Can you imagine what that does to the archetype of the wounded masculine? To face a woman who does not collapse under rejection, who does not beg to be seen, who does not mold herself to stay desirable. It forces the man to evolve or retreat. There is no middle ground, because this woman is no longer interested in potential. She does not fall for promises. She responds only to presence. And if that presence is not steady, if it is not grounded, if it is not willing to walk through its own fire, she will not hold the door open. She is not cruel. She is clear. She is not bitter. She is boundaried. She is not lonely. She is luminous. And she is not waiting. There is an ancient elegance in her detachment. It is not the kind of indifference born from ego or pain, but the transcendence of illusion. She has seen the dance of projection and rejection, the tug of war between validation and abandonment, and she has stepped out of the arena. Her love is no longer transactional. It does not plead. It does not bribe. It does not perform. It exists. Sovereign and whole, unbothered by who can or cannot receive it. This is the final becoming. She is no longer an archetype in a man's mythology, no longer the healer he drains, the muse he abandons, or the mirror he shatters. She is the goddess who has burned her own temple to the ground, sifted through the ashes, and found that she was always the fire. She doesn't seek worship, she demands presence. She doesn't crave attention, she honors alignment. And if you cannot walk beside her with truth, you will walk alone with your ego. Carl Jung spoke of the anima as the sole image of man, projected, misunderstood, idolized. But what happens when the anima wakes up and takes herself back? When the fantasy collapses, and the real woman stands in her place, unyielding, unashamed, unafraid? He must now choose to meet her with his full self, or to return to the chase, to the illusion, to the cycle of hunger and conquest. But she will not be there. She has stepped into another world, a world where her value is not determined by how much she gives, but by how deeply she knows herself. She no longer asks, "Will he choose me?" She now asks, "Will this nourish my soul?" She no longer whispers her truth in hopes of being accepted. She speaks it, clean, strong, absolute, and lets the unworthy fall away. It is not that she no longer desires because she is done with love. It is that she no longer desires what distorts her. She no longer desires to be rescued from loneliness by someone who cannot hold her depth. She no longer desires chaos disguised as passion, or inconsistency dressed as mystery. She no longer confuses the adrenaline of instability with intimacy. She desires truth, depth, sacredness, stillness. She desires only what honors her. And so she is no longer at war with herself. She does not silence her instincts to seem cool. She does not contort her intuition to seem rational. She no longer shames her emotions. She lets them rise and fall like the ocean. They are not weaknesses, they are waves. And she now is the moon. If you ever wonder where she went, why she no longer burns for your attention, or dances in the ambiguity, or leans toward your absence with hope in her eyes, know this: she didn't disappear. She disentangled from the scripts, from the stories, from the addiction to almost love. And in that space, she found something infinitely more powerful than desire. She found peace. And peace, for the woman who once lived on the edge of emotional survival, is the most radical thing she could have ever chosen. It is the revolution after the ruin, the quiet after the collapse, the holy ground where she stands, not needing to be seen, but seeing herself so fully that the world must adjust its gaze to match. She is the woman who no longer desires, because she has remembered who she is. And this remembrance makes her unshakable. She no longer chases, waits, begs, or pleads. She listens. She observes. She chooses. And the men who once held power through her yearning now find themselves powerless in her calm. Not because she holds resentment, but because she holds standards. Not because she is cold, but because she is clear. And when she finally meets someone who speaks the same language, not of ego, not of masks, but of essence, she will not fall. She will not lose herself. She will rise equally into the space where true connection begins. Until then, she is not empty. She is full. She is not searching. She is home. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.